Hi, today's video is going to be on the different properties of a parallelogram. So we're entering into our quadrilateral unit, and the first one that we're going to look at is this parallelogram. For the parallelogram, we have the definition, and the definition is that the opposite sides of the parallelogram are parallel. So if I look at my diagram below, this side is opposite this side, so those two sides are going to be parallel. The top is going to be parallel to the bottom. So in order for it to be a parallelogram, both sets of opposite sides have to be parallel. So we've got one set of parallel lines here, another set of parallel lines there. With the parallelogram comes different properties. Now the definition is the opposite sides are parallel, which could be a property. In addition to that, we have opposite sides congruent. So I have that. So we look at the sides that are opposite of each other. The top is going to be opposite from the bottom, so those two sides are congruent. That means I can set up the equation. If things are congruent, they are equal. I can set up 5x plus 10 is equal to 64. Now we have other sides that are congruent as well. The left side is opposite the right side, which means I could also set up the equation 2y minus 12 is equal to 18. So remember, if they are congruent, then we can set them equal to each other. The next property that we're going to get from this parallelogram is that consecutive angles are supplementary. This is going to come from the idea that same side interior angles of parallel lines are supplementary. So if I look at the top being parallel to the bottom, here's my transversal, which means consecutive angles are same side interior angles, which means they're going to be supplementary. Now I don't know those two, so I can't write an equation there, but if I look at this transversal, these two angles are same side interior angles, so I could write the equation 3p plus 15 plus 8z minus 22 is equal to 180. Again, that relationship is coming from the idea of same side interior angles based on the fact that we have a parallelogram. We've got two parallel lines being cut by a transversal. If I switch a little bit and I now use these as my parallel lines and this is my transversal, if this is my transversal, then these two angles are my same side interior angles. So I could also write the equation 130 plus 3p plus 15 is equal to 180. So again, from this property, there are two equations I could set up and write to solve. Next, we have opposite angles are congruent. So if we look at angles opposite, if these are consecutive next to, we look at opposite angles. Here are my two opposite angles, and here are my two opposite angles. I don't have this angle, so I can't write an equation there, but I have these opposite angles, and if they are congruent, that means I can set them equal to each other. So those are the definition gives us opposite sides parallel, plus we get three additional properties: opposite sides congruent, opposite angles congruent, and consecutive angles supplementary. So there's four different things, the definition plus the three additional properties that we know about every single parallelogram. So we want to use these properties to be able to solve. One, we know our lines are parallel, so I have the top is parallel to the bottom. I've got the left is parallel to the right. Because of this, we can use any parallel line property that we've learned. So here is my transversal cutting through those two parallel lines, which means we have alternate interior angles that are going to be congruent. So we have that x is going to have to be 28 degrees. We have a parallelogram, and that means that opposite angles are going to be congruent, which means 80 and W, those two have to be the same. So W is equal to 80 degrees. We didn't mark our diagram. Let's go ahead and mark our diagram with that. Now, unrelated, but something that we've learned, don't forget the basics. I have a triangle right here, and I have a triangle right here. The sum of a triangle, all three angles have to add up to 180. So if I want to find z, I do 180 minus 80 minus 28, and we end up with 72 degrees. Using alternate interior angles, I know that these angles are going to be congruent as well, or I could do the triangle sum theorem again over here. That's going to give us that y is equal to 72 degrees, and z is going to be equal to 72 degrees. So make sure that you're not only applying the properties of a parallelogram, but you're also applying the properties of parallel lines and triangle sum, all the different properties that we've learned throughout the year. Our last question is, could the figure be a parallelogram? Explain why or why not. So we think about our properties. The definition is parallel lines. I don't have parallel lines given to me. Opposite sides congruent. I don't know anything about the opposite sides. Nothing's listed. All I have is angles. So based on the two properties that we've learned, consecutive angles have to be supplementary and opposite angles have to be congruent. So if I look here, here's consecutive angles. 105 plus 75 is equal to 180, so that's good. But I have to check all consecutive sides. So I look at 115 plus 75. Well, that's equal to 190, so that's no good. I could stop there, but if I check here too, 115 plus 85, that's going to be 200. Again, that's no good. If I check these angles, 105 plus 85 is equal to 190, which again is no good. So we could say no, because not all consecutive angles are supplementary. That's not the only way that you can disprove this. The other way is we said the opposite angles have to be congruent. If I look at 105 and 115, 85 and 75, I also could have said no, because opposite angles are not congruent. So remember, you want to look at the properties. Think about what you should expect to find. If you find that property, then good. It works. It is a parallelogram. If you don't find that property to be true in all cases, then it's no. Then just explain why you said yes or why you said no. All right, that is it for the first day of parallelograms.